David R. here. Today I'm going to talk to you about this book, Chasing Justice, my story of freeing myself after 2 decades on death row for a crime I didn't commit, by KERRY MAX COOK. This is a story about injustice on a whole other level. You know, obviously the criminal justice system isn't perfect, but the story in this book gives us a really dim view of what the criminal justice system is like if it's allowed to just kind of do whatever it wants. Okay, so in the year 1977, KERRY MAX COOK was 21 years old, and he was arrested and eventually convicted for the murder and rape of Linda Jo Edwards. Now, he was innocent, but he still spent 22 years on death row for a crime he didn't even commit. Anyway, so a brief history of KERRY MAX COOK. He was just an army brat, I guess you could say. He was even born in Germany, and the family moved around a lot, and eventually they made their way to Jacksonville, Texas. And when KERRY was in his teens, he committed some crimes. He stole several vehicles to joyride in. He vandalized a store. He ran away from home. He was expelled from school as well. And by the age of 17, he went to prison for a couple years. And he also spent some time in a mental hospital for depression. And since he had this criminal record, he was like the usual suspect for police. So, you know, there are people like that around. I mean, once you have a felony conviction and you get pulled over by the cops, a lot of times it's going to be one of those stops where they search the vehicle, pat the person down. It's like harassment as far as I'm concerned. All right, so before I get into the trial, I'm going to read something to you. I want you to imagine being tossed onto death row because you were in the wrong place at the wrong time, hanging around the wrong people on the wrong side of town where a girl was killed, and you got blamed for the crime, so you got the wrong lawyers to represent you in the wrong state at the wrong time in history. KERRY was accused of being a homosexual, and homosexuality was illegal in Texas at the time. And you were unfortunate enough to get the wrong judge, the wrong prosecutors, the entire wrong corrupt Texas criminal justice system that was against you because the wrong people you were hanging out with lied about you watching some movie that you didn't see, a movie that supposedly inspired you to kill the woman you were framed for killing. And those wrong people lied about you confessing to things that you didn't confess to, and that's how the wrong man, KERRY MAX COOK, wound up on death row for 22 years. I wrote that. It didn't come from the book, but it essentially sums up the book. All right? Anyway, as for the trial is something like you would read about in a Kafka novel. Now, I haven't read the Kafka novel, The Trial, yet, but I have the book, and I will read it. But I know about it, and I know that this story of KERRY MAX COOK is Kafka-esque. All right, so now KERRY was in Linda Jo's apartment before the murder. Him and her had made out. They met at the pool of the apartment complex, and his fingerprint was on the door. Okay, so he made out with her, and he even had passion marks on his neck, but he didn't kill her. Anyway, so he had mentioned to some friends he had said that, you know, there's this girl, she's walking around naked past her window. And other people had seen her too, so he wasn't the only one. But he said, yeah, that girl I made out with. And he didn't have sex with her, but he made out with her. Okay, so this statement was used against him, and he was accused of being a peeping Tom for mentioning that, even though other people had seen her too, and it wasn't like he was right by her window looking in. I mean, everybody could see her, it's just in full view. But it was used against him. All right, so after Kerry was arrested, he did the smart thing. He actually got a lawyer. He didn't make any false confession, even though he was interrogated and he was physically abused by police. But he didn't make any false confession. He got a lawyer, but he didn't get the best counsel. I don't know if he would have been better off if he just went with the public defender. Probably be the same outcome, most likely. But that's what he did. Okay. As for the trial itself, motions were denied. Evidence of his innocence was suppressed. The judge was on the side of the cops, and I mean, there's just so many injustices. You got to read for yourself in this book. Unbelievable. Okay, so now we get to a jailhouse snitch is the first witness for the prosecution. It's not funny, but it's funny in a weird kind of way. Okay, this jailhouse snitch, he's referred to as Shyster Jackson in the book, but his real name is Edward Scott Jackson. He mentioned that Kerry and himself were looking at a Hustler magazine, and Kerry reacted strangely to a dark-haired girl in the magazine. And he had apparently confessed that he had killed Linda Jo Edwards. So now a woman named Paula Rudolph, who originally said she saw a guy who looked like a guy named James Mayfield. Now, James Mayfield at the time supposedly had an alibi, but James Mayfield did something very smart. He was asked to do a lie detector test, but he told police, he said, hey, I need to go and pick up my daughter from school, I think it was, and he never came back to the police station. He lawyered up. He got the best lawyer in town. And the lawyer said, no, my client's not going to take a lie detector test. My client's not going to answer any questions unless I am there. Very smart. Very smart. And James Mayfield, who probably committed the crime, went free. And police never even went after him, ever. Anyway, Paula Rudolph, she eventually changed her story so that it fit the prosecutor's narrative that Kerry was the guy she saw and not James Mayfield. All right, now another witness, Robert Hone. He was a homosexual man that Kerry was staying with. And he claims that he and Kerry were watching a movie called The Sailor Who Fell from Grace with the Sea. And in this strange movie, there was a cat mutilation and there was a voyeurism episode in there somewhere. And he claims that Kerry was inspired by this movie to mutilate and kill Linda Jo Edwards. In 1978, Kerry was found guilty, and he was sent to death row. He was guilty of capital murder. Capital murder and first-degree murder are the same thing, except capital murder includes the death penalty if you're in a state where death penalty is allowed. First-degree murder, you would probably just get life without parole or however that works. But capital murder, you would get lethal injection. So on death row, Kerry was what's called punked out. It means he was raped several times by different prisoners. In interviews, he has said that he was a sex slave, like he was prostituted. He doesn't mention it that much in the book, but apparently that went on. Obviously, that's a pretty bad thing. He also attempted suicide several times by cutting himself. He even cut his penis. So I guess he didn't respect his own manhood because of the rapes and stuff. And while he was in prison, his brother Doyle Wayne was killed, his father died, and his mother blamed him, KERRY, for their deaths. So she kind of like disowned him. And then later on, when he eventually did get out, he had to stay with her for a while, and she just told him to leave. Get out. Just go. She didn't really like him that much. She felt ashamed of what he had put them through. Even though he's innocent, it wasn't his fault. In prison, he learned about the law as much as he could. So he was writing to the media, writing motions, and he also became a Christian after reading Evidence That Demands a Verdict, that book. So he turned fear into peacefulness. And eventually, Centurion Ministries caught on, and they really, really helped him a lot. Now, through them, they found a philanthropist named J. Reagan, and he donated $100,000 to get KERRY released on bond. And David Gelbaum donated $365,000 to Centurion to help defend KERRY. Now, KERRY had a total of 3 trials, and on the eve of the 4th trial, he signed a nolo contendere. And with that, he took a no contest plea. He didn't plead guilty to the crime, he just took a no contest plea. And after he was released, things started to look up. He went back to school, he got married, had a child, he went on speaking tours, he met politicians, actors. He was even part of this movie called The Exonerated, and it won awards and things. Anyway, some questions about this. Was KERRY Max Cook's case about justice, finally putting the killer in prison? Or was it just about people wanting to advance their careers and not look bad because they were wrong? I have to say that this story is an example of probably others that go on, although they're just not publicized. There's no books about them. But there's a lot of innocent people who are in prison, who are on death row even. People who've made false confessions. People who were just set up by cops. People who are slow, low IQ. They are tricked into saying that they did something that they didn't do, or they are fearful that the cops might do something to them, or there's a variety of reasons, but the things that happened to KERRY Max Cook should never ever happen in a country that is supposedly free. But you have to understand, the criminal justice system is about putting people in prison, and it doesn't care if you are innocent or guilty. It doesn't care. So I suggest reading this book for yourself. This is a book that you won't want to put down after reading a few chapters. You will want to read the whole thing. I took notes in here and things. See that? And it's a very, very good book. I wish this guy would write more books. Anyway, that's all I got. Talk to you later. Bye.